Hello student. Today we are going to discuss this course. The title of the course is Understanding Gender and Law, BGS 011. Today we are going to discuss this topic, Patriarchy in Law, which is part 1. We all of us knows that how patriarchy derives the social relationship and it goes hand in hand in the society. And also we know that how patriarchy produces the relation that define society and law, and sometimes also the law and society, because it interchanges, or one would say that it also constantly getting produced by the forces of the law and society. So in this lecture, the objectives are to know about the conceptual category and theoretical aspect of the patriarchy, to understand the impact of the patriarchy on different social groups, especially women. And if we look at, in fact, this whole debate, we need to also understand the inequality in order to understand these debates which I talked about, patriarchy. So according to the United Nations Development Programs, Gender Inequality Index, which we call it GIIE, India is standing as 189 countries, international countries, and you would see that the rank is 131. Now, Gender Inequality Index, being an inequality index, measures gender gaps in 3 diverse magnitudes, which are reproductive health, and mostly with indicators of maternal mortality ratio and adolescent birth rate, then empowerment, female to male ratio with the high schools education, and their representation in legislative bodies, and female labor marker participation compared with males. So, and then in what ways that, in addition to its, sort of, one would call it, unified or the collective provisions, and how one can, look at and situate this law to act as an, sort of transformative tool to mitigate gender inequality from other lives. So we will try to know the linkages between the gender inequality and patriarchy through this discourse. So let us understand this category and the concept of the patriarchy in order to, to deal with the sort of, expansion which constitute, gender inequality also. So in other words, that I wanted to argue that, how one would take forward this debate theoretically or conceptually. What does it mean, patriarchy, and how it offers sort of, a set of separate tools to address the gender inequality? Or does it that, it's important to sort of combine or position it with other concepts such as, bureaucracy, capitalism, heterosexualism, and so on. If we look at, sociologist Michael Ryan, he defines patriarchy as a sort of seemingly ambiguous system of sex-based operation that, operates in all spheres of the society, and you can always go and look for the deep, chapter which he contributed in the Encyclopedia of the Social Theory on Patriarchy in the, edited volume, which got published by Sage in 2004 by George Ritzer. So these kind of, sort of sex-based operation presents a power differential between two, sort of sexes that mainly affects women. And therefore, further we need to understand that it allows men to sort of dominate and control them etymologically to great extent culturally, and patriarchy owes its origin from the Greek word patriarchos, that translate into ruling father. Or further you would see that, or if we look at in fact the dictionaries, the dictionary definition says that it is social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or the family, the legal dependence of the wives and the children, and the reckoning of the descendant and inheritance in the male line, unquote. So one has to also understand that how historically this male supremacy, or the matter of the family and the inheritance, the ways in which described, and how it is transforming or transcending of this kind of system as the main organizing sort of force in the society, which leads to which I mean in everyday life, which seems to us that very simple, but at the same time it is limiting the potential of the human history, and one must understand this historical position. And I would like to recommend all of you to read this Grundalerner's book also. And what learners talked about it, which we will understand also. So according to Lerner, patriarchy operates in more complex manner at multiple levels in our society, and any attempt to simplistically define it as a system limited to the family where the eldest male member dominates others as the head, or the whole property is passed on wholly through the male lineage, or in public life where the divine rights of the king make him the worldwide patriarch of the nation, and eventually the decider of his subject fate, lands to distortion of the history. And I would like you to recommend this important book by Lerner, The Creation of Patriarchy, which got published in the year 1986 by Oxford University Press, New York edition. And this book is in fact available everywhere, because it will enhance your knowledge production, and you would gain more knowledge about it. So she further argues that seems that such a narrow interpretation of patriarchy as an underutilization of this seemingly useful concept, especially in the wake of democratization of the modern nation state, as patriarchy has found new ways to manifest itself in more complicated ways. Now the problem is that with a thin or narrow conceptualization of patriarchy is that with the advent of the constitutional recognition of the rights to equality, it seems as if patriarchy began in a classical antiquity. Again, I'm quoting this from Lerner's book, that patriarchy began in the classical antiquity and ended in the 19th century with the granting of the civil rights to women and married women in particular. Thus, Lerner argues for having a broader approach to patriarchy in the following terms. And I again quote, patriarchy in its wide definition means the manifestation and institutionalization of the male dominance over women in a society in general, or women and children in family, and the extension of the male dominance. And in fact, what it suggests? It suggests that the men hold power in all the important institutions of the society, and you see that women are deprived of access of such kind of power. So it does not imply that women are either totally powerless or totally underprivileged of the rights and the resources, influence, and so on. It varies in fact because we have a number of feminist scholars representing diverse ideological location and the position, and who have used patriarchy in different ways to further arguing their politics of the gender equality. Now, for instance, if we if we talk about liberal feminists, liberal feminists are the one who highlighted on the patriarchy's false notion of so-called natural and stress on uh, naturalism as a result of social construction. Uh, they did not claim that anyone, sex is in any way better than the other. Rather, they emphasize on, sort of, creating an egalitarian, equal society in which you would see that women and men morally are capable of sharing all kinds of responsibility equally. And therefore, they seek to, and I again quote from Ryan's work, that use the state and appeal to the public sense of the moral reason to undo the system of the sex inequality inherently pervasive under patriarchy, and unquote this. So you would see, as a response to the liberalism, how one has to see that it can be a distorted notion of the equality, or sort of the individualism. Now, socialist feminists are the one who also talked about gender inequality, and they are the one who talked this whole structural or the hierarchy which is existing in the society based on also the division of labor, or one would call it division of the class. And you want to go and see, you can always look at this Ryan's book, which will be very interesting to read. So in this sense, that they see that both capitalism is the one who is driving force of the patriarchy, along with all kinds of operation which one would see. They problematize this whole debate of the private ownership, or the ownership of the private property, and the ways in which they are engaging with the capitalist society, by drawing from the historical reasons, which tells us again further how this ownership is, and the ownership of the property, control and ownership of the woman, children, men, how it is channelizes. So this sort of analysis also informs us that what is true as a normative structure of the society, the ways in which state look at it, its laws have sustained the whole patrilineal succession of the family property through various religious personal laws. And you can relate this debate in order to understand the personal laws and the fantastic books which are available, like Flavia Agnes and the other scholars who have done extensively work on personal laws and family. So similarly, the law there and the ways in which it overpowers the father, the control over the guardianship and the custody of the minor child. I mean, these are the issues which are pertaining to again the power hierarchy through the laws, and one would see the how patriarchy retains through that also. So it continues to sort of undervalue woman, and then also the question of the paid unpaid labor within home or in agriculture. And you could also see and understand this debate which feminists have very forcefully taken out, the care economy and so on and so forth. So in this sense, one would see that capitalism and patriarchy acts and mutual, sort of, it goes mutually, and it's not something that which one would call it that it separates from each other. In fact, it is the one which is reinforcing the system that controls, that thrives, and by, sort of retaining the sexual division between the public and the private spaces. And I would again recommend to you that to understand this debate of public and private patriarchy and the spaces, uh, go through this wonderful book, Theorizing Patriarchy, which is written by Sylvia Wolby, got published in 1991, again by OUP. So it is also become the private and public, sort of divide or dichotomy that women's labor at home or agriculture, care work, and so on and so forth. And then, one has to also understand that how it is rewarded, the unpaid compared to the men. And you can understand this from the daily examples which I want to cite out here. Now, construction workers, take an example that, how women and men are getting paid. We all of us knows we live in, urban places, semi-urban places, even in at the, agriculture. If you see, those places, that the women are less paid always. In fact, that, the legal measures are there that equal, payment, equal wages should be given to both. Even though, the woman is more hardworking sometime, in the sense that I'm talking about that, when one is looking at the kind of work which they took forward. For instance, like take an example of the hilly area. It's a woman who are the one who go, collect the wood, collect for the fire and everything in those hilly areas, jungle. And you often see that the kind of, health issues which emerge. So you would see that even at the workplaces continue to remain hostile, the question of the, wage or the labor, and which is not in fact, favorable to the woman. So, if we go further, then we would see, as I mentioned to you, the unfair wages, lack of, this debate can be extended to sexual harassment, unfair wages, lack of maternity. And I would recommend again further to read this fantastic work by Archana Parashar. The title is The Gender Inequality and Religious Personal Laws in India, which got published by Brown, Journal of the World Affair in 2018. So you would see that those benefits are not there, but at the same time, thus keeping women at the home, where one would see that, how it is easily exploited. Now, the patriarchal system which one is talking about, of course, is not only which divides the labor, it also in fact minimizes the production cost by maximizing the capitalist profit. And it also helps the class divide by keeping the working class, mostly men, enslaved by the capitalist interests. I think that the intervention of the radical feminist, on the other hand, is a very important take, and they in fact, expanded this approach by conceptualizing the patriarchy. For radical feminists, patriarchy operates both through a physical and emotional method of, inflicting control, and then, it then further, damages women, besides the more systematic ideological, or one would call it epistemic form of the violence. And thus you see that this category later on becomes very interesting when one draws upon the gender nature or the physical and emotional form of the violence with the entire, system which is producing the knowledge, and which is based on, again, it might be law, culture, science, religion, and so on and so forth. One has to then further understand that how devaluing household labor whether it's a pregnancy, motherhood, and so on, is deeply rooted and normalized objective justification of the biology, psychology, medicine, and so on how the law continues to see these categories like sex work or morally wrong, instead of seeing as a fairly valued form of the labor. And I'm drawing this idea, in fact, from the chapter which Saurabh Mandal from Jindal Global University has written. And similarly, that because when one is talking about the radical feminism, I think one of the important intervention which they did is that they are linking the whole debate of the patriarchy with the violence, and the root cause, according to them, is that the patriarchy, which is based on the culture, which one has to understand, and you would see the different kinds of forms of the violence in the society, like for instance, rape, female genital mutilation, forced abortion, and so forth. And the ways in which then further it is engaging on the ideological sustained knowledge system, like, which is based on religion, law, culture. And then it becomes a very complicated to understand this multiple ways, like for instance that state, legislature, bureaucracy, court, police, etc., non-state actors like family, school, media, and then how it is, in fact, sort of retaining or maintaining power or the control in the female bodies. And therefore, one needs to understand, or the focus should be that complexity that is written in the patriarchy, and which results then, from one generation to other generation. And one would see also that, how, it operates even through thinking of women also, and then it leads to some sort of ideological questions to us. So when one is talking about systematically the ideological or epistic form of the patriarchy, I think the intervention which Uma Chakravarti done, which we need to understand very carefully when it comes to the Indian society. We all of us knows that Indian society is a structural, very hierarchical society based on class, caste, gender, and you would see these actors which are mentioned right now, like for instance, state, institution, and other, and also the institutions like family and so on, and where she, she directly gets into this debate of the Brahmanical patriarchy. Now, I would ask the student that to read, Gendering Caste, which is a book which Professor Uma Chakravarti wrote, in which she argues that patriarchy of the woman is something which is central to the Brahmanical patriarchy, as one would see that, how caste class goes hand in hand. Then, she condemns this whole debate in the caste marriage, the ways in which that it operates, how, this upper caste women have, always have been, sort of object of the moral panic. And I would recommend that, to read this debate very categorically, because she draws from the energy again from Ambedkar's work, Caste in India, in which she talk about that, whole history, where she talks, as Ambedkar says, that woman is gateway to the religion. She draws this energy and argues that this debate we need to understand in order to understand the caste system and the patriarchy, particularly, how it pollutes the upper caste and perhaps, the intercaste marriage also. So institutions like, upper caste women how it has been preserved, how the sexuality of woman which is in question, and you would see that how that particular kind of ideology, autonomy, dependency, class privilege, caste privilege, which is written through this. Unfortunately, the feminist scholarship which is there, you would see that has focused on heterosexual female experiences and sort of ignoring, or individualizing, ignoring the heterosexual lived experiences, and we need to map and understanding this debate. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to also further extend this debate in the context of the LGBTIQ experiences and along the side of the patriarchy. And you would see that 1990s onwards that queer theorists also challenge and emerge, and as a result you would see this whole debate of the multiple intersectional forms and the domination and oppression which emerge. So I would conclude this lecture by saying that the effort in this lecture was that to conceptualize and theoretically draw and understand this debate of patriarchy from legal perspective, how the other marginal categories like LGBTIQ, and in the Indian context that how the major intervention is done particularly by the radical socialist feminist and the liberal feminist, and the ways in which it has been taken forward in Indian context. And I would recommend, in fact, to read Uma Chakravarti's book, Conceptualizing Brahminical Patriarchy in Early India, Gender, Class, Caste and State, which got published in EPW in 1993. I would also recommend you to read Judith Butler's work, In Kinship Always Already Heterosexual, in Wendy Brown's book, which she edited. So, thank you to all of you.